I got my hands on one of the early releases of the QingYu Flight Feather 01 30S. Now, from the clip you've just seen, you might think it's an absolute shoe-in for the ultralight casting reel that you dreamed of. I have to say, this reel is extremely interesting because it's kind of full of contradictions. Yes, on the one hand, you've got this amazing casting performance straight out of the box. It's got the world's lightest stock spool at this moment in time. And there's a ton of things going for it. You have to say as well, it's unbelievably distinctive in the colour scheme that it's chosen. And while I kind of, I'm a big fan of the blue and orange, and obviously you can see that in the Fishing Discoveries logo, I'm not quite so sure about the white flecks on this one, so perhaps it's something that will grow on me. But beyond that, obviously we've got this metal-bodied reel, incredibly high performance, and some really nicely engineered sort of touches to it. For instance, the drag star is a really nice, smooth clicking action. It also goes down to pretty much zero in terms of drag, and then also gives you plenty of drag power at that top end as well. So that's all good. I also really like the grip, the feel on the handles. These knobs are really, really nicely engineered and they fit perfectly. Good grip, really nice tactile sensation with that kind of ported almost mesh, rubbery mesh or rubberized mesh over the top of the main sort of solid handle. Again, they talk quite a lot about the alloy that they've used for the metal body, and it is incredibly light. They focus a lot on the lightness of this reel, albeit in a metal body, so they've worked really, really hard to keep the overall weight down. Which is interesting because, as an example, I mentioned the drag being very smooth and going down to zero, but you've probably noticed there is no clicking drag. So for me on a BFS reel, I really, really prefer that audible cue that your line is paying out when you're playing a fish. So given the relatively high introductory price point, which I've shelled out for my own money to actually buy this isn't a sponsored review, it's a reel I've purchased to review for the channel. Given that introductory price point, being without a clicking drag, although there are JDM offerings that also come in at higher prices that have a silent drag as well, for me, if I was in the decision panel where they were kind of trying to decide whether to go with a clicking drag or to save, a few extra grams for the actual mechanism, I'd have gone with the clicking drag every time. However, as I said, they made that choice. They've definitely gone for that stripped down, really, really lightweight approach. It's interesting as well, the spool tension doesn't actually have a click on it as well. So that is, on the one hand, it's kind of infinitely adjustable. You don't have to kind of settle for the setting that sits between two notches, if you like, on the clicking mechanism. So there are fans of both styles. For this, I actually quite like the level of adjustability, and it fits very well with the smoothly engineered feel of this reel. It's 11+1 ball bearings, and the anti-reverse engages immediately and very positively. It did take me a while to actually be able to get this cover off the back. That switch there is very well engineered, but it's you need a very a very intentional clockwise movement. When you do it right, it comes off really easily, but I kind of I struggled a little bit trying to find the actual direction that needed to come on and off. But it is actually quite a good and easy to operate side plate removal, which is actually kind of a bit of a bonus really, because some reels it's a real wrestling match to get those things off there. There's a few interesting things. I'll come to the spool in a minute. The tolerances are very, very good. Also, I didn't mention before, but the thumb bar, very, very positive. No slop at all, either laterally or sort of when you're pressing it to engage it. Really, really nicely engineered. I mentioned before the ball bearings 11+1, it gives it an extremely smooth feel in the retrieve, but you don't get a ton of like free sort of spin with it. It is kind of like a very buttery smoothness, but you don't have like a ton of like perpetual motion with the handle whizzing around like that. But yeah, overall, nicely engineered frame. So coming on to the spool, this is really interesting. It's a MagTrack style brake, and as you'll see in some of the cast testing, it actually comes with some vacant spots, the little foam pads that kind of occupy the vacant spots. But then you can drop in, there's 3 extra magnets that get supplied in the box, so don't lose those when you open it. The packaging is quite very well done. It's a nice thick velvet bag that it's supplied in. The artwork on the supporting literature that comes with it is very nicely done as well. You can see the design process from the graphic design as well as the overall aesthetic of the reel itself. That's really well done. When the reel is supplied to you, there are these 2, 4, 5 magnets on this side of the brake plate. They're already in place, and they're arranged in a kind of a south-north, south-north, south arrangement, so they're alternating the polarity of it. I was able to check them just by using a compass to discover which pole was which, and to see whether the dot actually meant something, and in fact it did. It is possible to cast the reel straight out of the box, and as I say, we'll certainly see that in some of the upcoming footage with the magnets as they are. I preferred it with the 3 additional magnets in there to give me a little bit more headspace at that top end for where I'm really throwing those ultralight baits very hard. Coming onto the spool, this is really interesting because number one, it's obviously incredibly light, the lightest stock spool in the world as far as I'm aware of, as I'm actually publishing this video. The casting performance is tremendous out of the box with these very, very light baits. What I was interested to find was when I was trying to get a spool weight on this, I was only able to get a measurement with the bearing in place, and that was a nudge over 4 grams. And the stated weight of the spool without the bearing is, I think, 3.4 grams, and I can well believe that given the measurement that I got. However, even though this spool pin is very well manufactured, and that obviously sits inside the drive mechanism of the reel, when you remove that, you still can't get the bearing off the spool because the end cap that houses that spool pin is actually a larger diameter than the internal diameter of the spool bearing. So that is a bit of a challenge if you wanted to upgrade, for example, to a set of row bearings for this reel. It's very easy to remove the brake plate bearing, that comes out with no problem. There's a standard sort of spring clip mechanism in there. So as we'll see in the casting, which we'll move on to in just a second, it's easy to either upgrade or to clean that bearing. It is possible, I discovered, to clean this bearing in situ, and I'll show you how I did that. And I wanted to make sure that you could actually do that in a very simple way, so I actually did it out in the field whilst I was doing the cast testing. What you want is that if you ever drop it in the river, that you do want to be able to clean the thing up and actually kind of get it back to, you know, as good as new condition. The casting for me, really interesting because of the changeable weather conditions and the wind and the direction and strength of that. I always like to benchmark my casts with new reels wherever possible by picking, you know, a standard to compare it to. And at the moment I'm really favouring the Solo King Acura because it has great all-round performance across a wide range of lures, including the infamous 1 gram trout magnet. But casting against that tape with a very slight following wind, on this particular day the Acura posted a maximum distance of 13.9 metres. Just spooling up the flight feather with 30 metres, the same length, 30 metres of 4-pound fluorocarbon, and the first cast straight out of the box, that went actually just beyond, I think, 13.9 metres with the brakes on full, and that's with just the factory setting without the additional magnets in there. So that was kind of quite a good start as a first ever cast without really kind of getting used to the reel at all. Throwing some more casts, and I believe that the best cast that I had with just the complete out of the box setting, hadn't done anything to the reel at all, and it went 15.4 meters, which it's just a stupid distance. Basically, that's further than I think any of the other reels that I've tested so far. I found that I was having to, when I'm throwing really hard to get maximum distance with those very light lures, I found that I was kind of basically having to max the brakes out to do that. That brings me on to a little bit of a niggling point. I don't like the plastic brake dial adjustment. I know that quite a few more expensive models have that plastic dial. It's more the fact that it is quite stiff. Even though it doesn't have a clicker attached to it, it's quite difficult to move it between the settings. It's not impossible, and that firmness, I suppose, does mean that you don't knock it accidentally, but it does make it quite challenging to just to finally adjust it. That's why I was interested in adding in the 3 additional magnets that are supplied with the reel, and just to give me that extra bit of breathing space at the top end of the braking for throwing for absolute maximum distance. And I found that the distances, the results that I got with that were basically the same as the maximum that I managed to achieve with the just as the reel came straight out of the box. But what I found was that I just had that little bit extra. If I needed it, I could actually crank up the brakes, and if I was throwing, for example, into a strong headwind, I had more braking available to help me out with that. Where there was a bit of an interesting difference was in the cleaned bearings. As I've mentioned, it was pretty easy to get the clip out, retrieve the bearing from the side plate using the Roro bearing puller tool, and then just sluicing that round in some acetone, blowing off the excess, and then spinning it out to dry it until any of the residue was removed. And that did actually improve the free spinning performance of the bearing on the tool itself. Having replaced that, what I did was I found a small diameter plastic cap, and before I came out I tested that plastic against the acetone to make sure that it didn't melt when I tried to use it. But that allowed me to fill up a small bath of acetone, and then with the spool bearing in situ on the spindle, I could dunk that in and sluice it around. Get it well bathed in the acetone, roll it around the edge of the vessel, and actually clean out any of the greasy residue that was in there. And then just spin it off, blot it, blow it, dry it off as normal. And then that allowed me to replace it in. Again, although the overall casting performance was similar, with the most favourable casting conditions and with my very best and smoothest casting stroke, it belted out the cast just an insane distance. Yeah, again, to qualify that, I certainly couldn't cast that into a wind, but with that very light following breeze, it sailed out there crazy distance. I think on the occasions where the wind was in my face a bit, I was still getting to the kind of 14 metre mark, which again is beyond what I've been able to do with the Solar King Acura. The big question is, do I recommend that you buy one? And that's such a difficult question to answer, because there are so many things to like about this reel, and it's basically come out of nowhere. I can't find any information on the company that's manufactured this reel. It looks like it's been designed from the ground up, and there's the unbelievably light spool, there's the fantastic casting performance, it's really well engineered, very smooth feeling reel. Basically, if you're the kind of person that always has to modify and tweak and change the reel and put new components in it, that's probably going to be a deal breaker. However, if you just like to pick things up and have them function fantastically straight out of the box, in terms of casting, yeah, you can't really go wrong with this. And it is, even though it's a premium price point for a Chinese market reel, it's still quite a degree cheaper than the next most capable Japanese reel when we're talking about these ultralight baits. So we'll see what happens to the price over time. The only other two things really, the casting brake adjustment is a little bit stiff. That plastic dial probably takes that premium shine off it a little bit. And then for me as well, a big one would be a clicking drag. I can see myself hanging onto this reel and still fishing with it and using it, because it's an exceptional casting tool, and I'm looking forward to getting it on stream and actually sort of landing some fish on it as well. But hopefully I've laid out for you there the kinds of considerations you'll have to make, because there are lots of things in the plus and the minus column depending on what your preferences are for your BFS reels. So if you've enjoyed this review, please consider subscribing to my email list, my BFS VIP newsletter, where you'll get all these kind of things as a first notification, plus a ton of other exclusive content. And you'll even get a little free welcome gift just to show my appreciation for you becoming a member of the BFS VIP tribe on Fishing Discoveries. Catch you in the next episode.